All right, everybody, welcome back to SportsLine. Once again, I'm Jon Burton filling in for Steve Lehman, who's still making his way back from Anaheim. Steve covering games 1 and 2 of the Western Conference Finals between the Predators and the Ducks. Of course, that series tied 1-1, as we said. Game 3 tomorrow night here in Nashville at Bridgestone Arena. And right now, we want to bring in our good buddy Robby Stanley, who covers the Predators for NHL.com. Robby, first of all, how are you tonight, buddy? Thanks for being on.
I'm doing great, JB. Always fun to join you. How are you?
Always fun to have you on. We were having a good time waiting for the Preds plane to land today over at the airport, so I always appreciate that. All right, I'm going to ask you about this whole Ryan Johansson, Ryan Kesler thing in just a minute, but I wonder if you could speak to the entire physicality of this series so far through 2 games. Here's my fear, Robby. I predicted the Predators to win this series at the beginning in 6 games. I predicted that they would get a split of the first 2 in Anaheim, which they've done, and they're still on target to do what I predicted. However, when you look at the physicality that the Anaheim Ducks are bringing, we knew they were a big physical team. Maybe I might have underestimated how big and how physical they are. My fear, my early growing fear is that maybe this physicality could wear down the Predators as this series goes on, which would give a huge edge to Anaheim. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a well-founded fear, especially, this is 2 pretty physical series in a row that the Predators would have had to play. When you talk about the Blues and how physical that series was, I thought the Predators handled the physicality in that series pretty well. I thought they handled the physicality of the Ducks pretty well in Game 1. I thought Game 2 was really when you started to see the Ducks take over physically. That's a team that they have a lot of physicality and a lot of tough guys out there, but I think the thing that really separates them from other teams that do that is they also have a lot of speed, too. So when you combine the speed and the strength and the size and the physicality, I think that's what really makes this Ducks team unique, and they used it pretty well to their advantage in Game 2. So I absolutely think that's a fear that's pretty founded. You just look at the longer a series goes, the deeper you are in the playoffs, I think the more worn down your body becomes. So it's important, I think, for the Predators to continue to set the tone on home ice in these next 2 games. Obviously, you have to have one of them, but I think it's really important for this Predators team to get both of them and make sure they maintain home ice advantage in this series and end it as soon as they possibly can.
Robby, what do you think went wrong last night in Game 2? The Preds come out flying. They get those 2 goals right off the bat in the first period. They give up that power play goal late in the first period, and then the Ducks go crazy in the second with 3 goals. Was it more of what the Ducks did right and the Predators did wrong, or vice versa?
I think it was a little bit of a combination of the 2, but I think a lot of it was what the Predators did wrong, particularly in that second period. I certainly think that Anaheim got some momentum after that first goal on the power play to end the first period. If you go down into the locker room after the first period and it's 2-0, I think that's a different story. Obviously, getting that first goal before the first period ended, I think, was huge for the Ducks. But in the second period, I thought the Predators were just sloppy with the puck. They weren't making good decisions. They allowed Anaheim to get a lot of speed coming at them through the neutral zone when they had the puck. Weren't very stout defensively and standing up on the blue line like they have been pretty much all playoffs long. And let's be honest here, Pekka Rinne has been great for this team all playoffs long, but he was kind of shaky last night, even on some of those goals where you think maybe that wasn't his fault. It just didn't seem all night long that he was confident, that he was comfortable, and I think that's really the first time all playoffs that you can say that. So I didn't think the Predators played particularly well in the second period, not much better in the third period. I didn't think they were on their A game like they were to start that game, and they allowed the Ducks to generate a lot of speed heading through the neutral zone, which allowed them to enter the offensive zone a lot easier than we've seen teams do that with the Predators so far in the playoffs. So a combination of things, but I certainly think the Predators could have played much better than they did in the second period.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Pekka Rinne. I was going to ask you about that. we kind of grown accustomed this spring to seeing Pekka Rinne play extremely well. He's been great. I think he's been the best goaltender of any playoff team this year. But he lets in a playoff high 4 goals last night, and some of them were, shots that you would normally think he would stop. Is this just a bump in the road for Pekka, or are there growing problems here, you think?
I think that's the big question, and you take a look at the way he played last night. It was really, like I said, it's the first time all playoffs long that I think you can legitimately say that he had a bad game, and particularly that 4th goal that Nick Ritchie scored. I thought that was a shot that you just have to save at this point of the year in the playoffs, and he just missed it. So you certainly, if you're a Predators fan, you got to hope that Pekka Rinne can rebound tomorrow. that one game in Game 2 was just kind of a blip on the radar, that it won't happen again. I certainly think the Predators did not play as well in front of him defensively as they had at times in the playoffs this year as well, too. So it's a combination of those two things, but there's no question that Pekka Rinne is going to have to play better as this series moves forward than he did in Game 2 for this Predators team to win.
Talking with Robby Stanley, who covers the Nashville Predators for NHL.com. Good friend of the show. Always good to have Robby on to get his insights on the Predators as we continue on here in the NHL playoffs. All right, Robby, it's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. This whole Ryan Kesler v. Ryan Johansson situation. Now, first off, I think the thing that stands out the most, that impresses me the most, is the fact that Ryan Johansson's not backing down from Ryan Kesler. This, from what I understand, wasn't always the case when he played in Columbus. Usually an antagonist like Kesler could, I don't want to say get in his head, but maybe get him off his game a little bit. And I think Joey's doing a good job for the most part keeping his composure, what he had to say after the game, his comments notwithstanding. But I think the fact that when your top line centerman is getting pestered like that by a heavy from another team and not backing down, that's going to play well in the dressing room for the Predators, isn't it?
Yeah, I would think so. And like you said, I think on the ice, Johansson's done an extremely good job in this series so far, battling through that and fighting through it. I mean, he's got 4 points in the first 2 games of this series, and you look at the numbers when he's been on the ice against Ryan Kesler, the Predators, for the most part, are still driving possession. They're driving play in the offensive zone. So it's not like Ryan Kesler is in there shutting that line down or anything. They've been quite productive so far in this series. And like you said, there's a lot of antics, a lot of things going on before the puck is dropped, after the whistle, that you have to deal with when you're going up against Ryan Kesler. And it's no secret he's been doing that for a decade now. So
yeah, I was going to ask you, like, for those fans who may not be too familiar with the Ducks or Ryan Kesler, is this pretty much his MO? Is this basically what he does? He takes your top forward and basically tries to mess with him a little bit?
Exactly, and he's the best in the league at it. He's made a name for himself doing that. Like I said, for the past decade, I mean, it was very similar when the Predators played him in the playoffs in 2011 against the Vancouver Canucks. He did the same thing, and he's been productive offensively against the Predators in his career as well. But his main job is to try to shut down the other team's best center, the best player they have. So he's trying to do that against Ryan Johansson so far. And I think the biggest thing that stood out to me, like you said, JB, is Johansson, to his credit, is fighting through it for the most part. He's been productive in this series. I think he's been the best player the Predators have had so far in this series. So he's got to continue to fight through it. He can't let Kesler throw him off his game and play that mental game that Kesler always tries to play. And if he can do that, I think with the talent he has and the postseason that he's had thus far, he can really carry this team offensively. He's done that so far in this series. If he can continue to do that and provide production on the power play when Kesler and Getzlaf and these guys are taking penalties and giving the Predators an opportunity to convert on the power play, if he can step up his game in that area and really drive the offense for this Predators team, that's how you make guys like Kesler pay. So that's what I'm interested to see if they can do in Game 3, convert more on the power play, not let the mental games affect them. And if they can do that, I really like their chances.
Johansson's comments after the game were I mean, kind of entertaining, to be honest with you. He looked exasperated, just almost flummoxed, like how can this guy go out there and call himself a professional athlete and do what he does? He was almost laughing about it. Now, of course, head coach Peter Laviolette says he was not aware of the comments that Johansson made. All due respect to Lavi, and I do respect him a lot, I find that hard to believe. But he did add that Johansson will be ready to play tomorrow night. And you have to figure at home with a chance to go up 2-1, your top-line centerman, who's got kind of a bee in his bonnet right now because of Kesler, he's going to come out ready to play tomorrow, don't you think?
There's no question, and I agree with you, JB. There's simply no way in the world that Peter Laviolette doesn't know about those comments, but that's a different conversation.
Right.
The other day, I absolutely believe that Ryan Johansson is going to come out tomorrow with something to prove it. And the one thing I think those comments will do, and what I think Ryan Johansson was trying to do, was plant a little seed for the officials, start to look for some of those late slashes, those plays after the whistle is blown that Kesler has been doing. I think Ryan Johansson is really trying to get the officials to key in on that and really focus in on that. So
it's kind of like when David Fizdale, the head coach of the Memphis Grizzlies, kind of took the bullet for his team again in the Spurs series, saying, hey, my guys aren't getting to the line enough. He took the bullet and with the hopes that the referees would maybe look out for fouls a little bit more in the next game. So there's always kind of a game within the game with this, isn't there?
Exactly. I mean, it's just pure gamesmanship at this point of the playoffs. So I'm really interested to see what kind of effect, if any, those have on the way the game is officiated tomorrow. And the one thing I know for certain it will do, that crowd is going to have so much anger and so much intensity directed towards Ryan Kessler. I think it's going to be really fun to watch.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. We're talking with Robby Stanley of NHL.com, who covers the Nashville Predators. We're breaking down the Western Conference Finals, tied 1-1, Game 3 tomorrow night. It's funny you mentioned that, how the crowd can get on another player who's been an antagonist. You're not old enough to remember this, but I am. Back in the days of the bad boy Pistons, when they were trying to beat the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference playoffs, Bill Laimbeer was just an absolute terror. He was taking down Parrish and McHale and Bird, and there was a home game in a very hotly contested series, and the myth is that the home crowd in Boston kind of egged on Robert Parrish to take a swipe at Bill Laimbeer, and they got into a little bit of a brawl. Ironically, neither player was ejected, but the belief is the crowd was so hot for Laimbeer that it kind of they kind of gave Parrish the power to do what he did. Now, I'm not predicting anything like that tomorrow, because you'd be foolish to take a dumb penalty or a fighting major or something like that in an important playoff game. But I think you're right. I think, especially with the way these crowds have been at Bridgestone Arena, you've been there, I've been there, it's something to behold. And they're going to, every time Ryan Kessler gets the puck tomorrow, or every time his name is mentioned, he's going to hear it from the crowd tomorrow night.
There's no doubt about it. And, there was so much energy in that crowd already, and then you throw in the fact that it's the first Western Conference final game at home in the history of the franchise, and now all of this stuff that's come out with Ryan Kessler. The energy and just the intensity level in that building tomorrow night is going to be off the roof. It's just going to be incredible. I think it's going to be at an all-time high. So I'm really looking forward to the kind of vitriol and the reaction that the crowd has towards Ryan Kessler. I think it's going to be pretty memorable.
Finishing up here with Robby Stanley of NHL.com as we break down the Western Conference Finals. Robby, curious to know, don't know how much you've seen of the Eastern Conference Finals between the Senators and the Penguins. At worst, the Senators are going to go back to Ottawa with a split. They take Game 1 in overtime, and you're talking to somebody who's covered the Pittsburgh Penguins. I know how their fans get. I think they felt after they had taken care of the Washington Capitals, who choke again in the playoffs in 7 games, they thought this would be a cakewalk with the Ottawa Senators. But I watched a lot of their series with the Rangers. I'm a bit of a Ranger fan, and I was impressed with the way they play and how resilient they are. This is not going to be a walkover for the Penguins in this series. If they want to get back to the Stanley Cup Finals, Stanley Cup Final, it's singular, they're going to have their hands full with the Ottawa Senators. You agree?
There's no doubt about it, and especially now when you look at the way Game 2 has started off, they're dropping like flies in Pittsburgh right now. Patrick Hornqvist missed the game. They lost Brandon Rust in the middle of this game.
Yeah, he took a vicious hit. Did you see that?
Yeah, Dion Phaneuf just laid him out in the middle of the ice, and then Justin Schultz was gone from the game as well. So you've already got Chris Letang missing, Patrick Hornqvist missing before this game started. Injuries have quickly become a problem for the Pittsburgh Penguins so far in the series, and even without the injuries, Ottawa has played so well in these playoffs. They've been so good defensively that they're able to frustrate a good offensive team like Pittsburgh. So there's no doubt in my mind that the Penguins have a fight on their hands in the Eastern Conference Final. They're going to find a way to break through it. It's going to take everything they've got.
All right, Robby, we get looking forward to Game 3 tomorrow night. Should be a great atmosphere. I'll be there. I know you'll be there. Thanks so much for jumping on SportsLine tonight.
Yes, sir. Anytime. Thanks for having me, JB.
All right. The great Robby Stanley from NHL.com. Follow him on Twitter at @RStanleyNHL, and also you can read him on NHL.com. All right. We're going to come back and hear more from the Predators as they get set for Game 3 tomorrow night with the Ducks. Your phone calls are welcome, too. Let's hear from you, Preds fans. What do you got for me? Let me know. We're back after this.